Hello everybody, Raspberry Barrel here, and happy holiday season! Today we'll be reading a biography by Mewni Historian on Deviant, and this will be our first biography by them, and we'll be reading Mo, the Original Monarch. Thank you so much to Mewni Historian for letting us read and feature their biography on the channel. And please go check out their Deviant page, they've got a lot of awesome queens and art. Please forgive me if I stutter, hesitate, or mispronounce anything, and for any noises in the background, and let's begin. From a distant, unknown land, she washed along Mewni's shore, with no past, only a bright future. Her descendants shall reign forevermore. And heads up, that BS means before Skywind's reign. Mo, the Original Monarch, lived through pre-known history to Quirk 41st, 933 BS, was queen 1049 BS through 998 BS. No spouse. Children: Alexandra Butterfly, Red Firefly, Zim Dragonfly. Mo was born in an unknown year, to unknown parents, in an unknown dimension, but her body would put her at early teens. She was on the first ships of the first settlers that arrived on Mewni in the early winter of 1049 BS, and had no memory of anything before they arrived, not even who they were. At first, there was only a few dozen of them, and a horrible blizzard hit in the night, and they would only survive by huddling together. All as amnesiac as Mo, her name vaguely came to her from what seemed like a dream in which a little blue man gave her the wand she so dearly clung to. She and the other settlers traveled by river south, further inland, and traveled east till they took a small river back north, deep into a flat land that would be perfect for a permanent settlement, and a small woods to provide, well, wood. She was the first wand user who didn't have an instructor on how to use the wand, but she figured it out rather quickly and used it to help expedite the setup of their civilization. She would use magic to help grow the crops, allowing massive harvests to grow every week, mostly corn, but also fruit orchards from just seeds. Within weeks she learned levitation, able to build houses from the wood of their ships and cut down trees, almost 30 houses a day. Her magic allows the first settlers to build a fully functional and established community within 6 selines. With precious metals they found, the other settlers forged her the crown and named her their leader, their protector, becoming their queen when the trees started to change color. For a while, life was simple for Mo, living in a wooden tower that allowed her to see most of the village from above, and smiled at their smiling faces. A couple of years later, in 1046 BS, the village was a city with well-worn roads, community baths, markets, and boar pits. The city was named Arcadia, but Mo became concerned when many of their women were getting pregnant, meaning their population was going to grow, and it will continue to do so. It was then that Mo led an expedition into the forest south of a large river to find suitable land for settlement. Mo and her party traveled into the forest and did find spots for smaller settlements, but came across the Monster King and his guards, and the group was chased back all the way back to their city. The monster gathered and proceeded to attack Arcadia, but Mo, seeing her people cowering in fear of the approaching army, forced her to dip down, creating a massive rock wall around the city and farming areas. It was the first glimpse into the ultimate magic form. While they were safe in their city, monsters did try to attack the city, but were unsuccessful. A couple more years later, in the summer of 1044 BS, Mo led an expedition to find land for a second city, and traveling back towards the ocean they came from years before, in a large forest west of the river they first traveled, and Mo, with more control of her magic, created a large wall like around Arcadia that made it so they could develop the area in peace. This second city, surrounded by forest, was known as Ilarion, and was constructed within only a couple of selines. The monsters hated the settlers even more that they built a second city, and that made travel between them difficult. Many suffered injuries along the way. But in the spring of 1043 BS, Mo heard rumors of a magic user in Illyrian. And it was true. A girl who was close to her in age, with the name of Pearl, was a healer who could create an aura with her hands that, when placed over the wounded, even bandaged one, would heal almost instantly. She could even spread her healing through water. It was slower, but more people got healed. Though Mo never really saw herself above her fellow settlers, she felt a kinship with Pearl that she hadn't had with anyone else. While the settlers rejoiced in another magic user's appearance, the monsters seemed to increase their attacks in response. Over a year later, in the fall of 1042 BS, there was a horrible attack on a traveling party, one with many fatalities. When Mo and Pearl got there quickly using magic, they saw all the monsters were dead with massive thorny vines through their chests. And in the center of the carnage was a crying girl about the age of Mo when she crossed over. The girl's name was Willow, and the two girls took her in as a sister. For a couple of years, the monster attacks became very low, probably because of Willow's and Mo's offensive magic, the latter becoming better at attack spells. In the late summer of 1039 BS, they tried to build a third city far east of Arcadia, but when they were almost finished, the monsters completely destroyed the nearly complete city. When Mo went to confront the monster king, she found he was dethroned by a Septarian in Seth. By the start of winter the same year, they were able to rebuild the city, one that would be the hub for the upcoming war, Lumenia. In 1038 BS, Mo traded in her dress for leather armor, fighting alongside her people. With Seth in charge, the attacks were more frequent and deadly, but Mo and Willow, along with several recruits from the cities who were courageous enough to fight against the monsters, put up heck of a fight. In the late spring, a teen warrior named Christopher earned the title general when his leadership saved over 200 soldiers. While he wasn't magical, he was a brilliant strategist, earning a spot in Mo's inner circle. Together, they kept monsters away from the cities, pushing the fights further east. A man with exceptional sight, Horace, noticed the monsters never crossed the rivers, entered the city areas through a small streak of land between a river and the ocean, so they were able to not only drive the monsters on the other side, but built a large fort to keep them out, Fort Chris. A warrior duo, Rush and John, returned from a journey south and found a large forest that would be perfect to house a large base. So in the start of 1037 BS, Mo and other Mewmans, as they were now referred to themselves, began work on another city that would be a new hub for the war, Colonia. But early summer of 1036 BS, Mo had allowed Horace, John, and Rush into her inner circle, as the three were the best fighters in her army. Each brought a unique preservance that helped them with the war. But in Lumenia, a fourth magic user emerged, a young teenager named Kai. He had the powers of metal, able to manipulate it and heat it up to change into whatever shape he wanted. He was hesitant about his magic, but with support from his newfound friends, he forged more weapons and armor in one day than the collective works of all other blacksmiths. Soon every soldier was fully equipped and really helped out, especially with what Mo was planning. Mo would continue to fight on the front lines, feeling bad for those who didn't make it. In the winter of 1035 BS, Mo, Pearl, Willow, Kai, Rush, Horns, John, and Chris led the charge on the city of Fagnar, the monster city, and the new capital since Mo burned down the old castle. Fagnar was between the river that was connected to the ocean, and one that was fed by mountains and connect to the lake and surrounding the old monster castle. They attacked from the forest, taking weeks of preparation and supply stocks in Colonia to lead the biggest battle fought yet. The battle was long and hard, taking 3 days, but on the third day, Mo was almost slain by Seth himself, but a man named Alexander jumped in front of her and died instantly. his blood getting on Mo's horrified face. Mo was so full of sadness and anger. Her circles glowed brighter than ever before, and she rose up and gained enormous wings, antennae with circles on the end, and 4 arms under her original 2. These included armor identical to the one she already had on. The glow was so intense it sent Seth flying with scorch marks. Her eyes changed with the star in them. She lifted her wand up high, and it transformed into a more beautiful form. With it and her unlocked inner magic, she was able to finish the battle, claiming Fenginar, and renamed it Thamor, meaning stronghold. It was then did the helpful yet irritating imp known as Glosric first appear. When Mo told him he gave her the wand years ago, he didn't know what she was talking about, but her display of inner magic earlier attracted him and wanted her to come with him. But she wanted to save her species first. Though they had a major victory that day, the war was far from over. Mo was determined to win the war after the Battle of Fenginar, as she thought it might make the monsters back down, but the opposite happened. It riled them up more. Monsters from across the mountains traveled to join Seth's army, but Mo's army would not yield, no matter how outnumbered they were. In the mid-spring of 1034 BS, Mo ordered the expansion of the forces past Fort Chris and into the peninsula-like areas surrounded by rivers, which had monster villages, and they drove them out. By the first frost, Willow was able to put up a thorny barrier in a narrow stretch of land north of the easternmost branch, further expanding Mewmins to colonize lands without interference, establishing Fort Solaria, named for a fierce warrior who slayed 10,000 monsters before her death. Mo and her friends had claimed major territory by the start of 1033 BS, and Mo was invited to a parley with Seth to discuss a treaty, but it was a trick. He sent a horde of fellow Septarians and tried to kill her, but Mo saw it coming, though a small part of her did hope it wasn't a trick. But she did bring back up her 7 friends, and while they couldn't kill the Septarians, they chopped all of Seth's little arm to bits, and Pearl's magic was so strong she sent out such a healing aura that she instantly healed her field from afar, helping them obtain victory in the fight, Seth running with his tail between his legs, or it would have been if Mo didn't rip him off. Mo was intrigued by the Septarians' immortality ability, as they had no magic, and began studying it, wanting to find some way to apply to abilities to her people. She began to experiment with enhancement spell on non-Mewmins, and glad she did, because she tried a muscle growth spell on a Squirlicorn, and while it was buff, the growth was too fast and too much that the poor creature exploded. She recorded her findings and experiments in what would be the old Book of Spells. Mo and her family after the Battle of Fenginar. Mid-1033 BS, the Mewmins began colonizing the lands between Fort Chris and Solaria, small villages of 100 or so Mewmins in each that provided supplies to the Mewmin armies who were fighting south of the river. In the land east of Thamor, Mo and her friends had claimed so much territory for the Mewmins that the cities themselves only had a few hundred in them, and the few thousand other Mewmins that weren't in the army were in the villages spread out over the lands and forests they claimed, allowing many of them to pursue their interests. The war intensified in the end of 1033 BS in a 5-day battle when the monsters tried to retake Thamor, while the city was used as a war hub when Lumenia became a civilian city, as it was sealed off from monster attacks, so it was mostly full of soldiers, while there was still a major toll taken on Mo's army. But they managed to win and keep the area under their control. While Mo was happy that they were winning, they were starting to lose more soldiers than they can spare. In the early days of 1032 BS, Mo was really starting to worry. While they had conquered many of their known world, the monsters knew more, and she had no idea how many monsters were out there. The Battle of Thamor really dealt a number of her army, and the remains of her army were guarding around the river between Thamor and Fort Chris and Solaria, the front, to keep monsters from getting into the civilian areas. and some forces in the cities and patrolling the villages to protect them from the few monsters that managed to slip through. If Mo moved the domestic forces to the front, they could hold up the line and withstand attacks, but that would leave the homelands defenseless. In a dark hour for her, she got a message that many new Mewmins wanted to join her army. Those who would have been too young when the war started. While she was reluctant to let them join, she decided to let them, and her army's power grew. The mass of new recruits stayed behind as domestic forces for some training, and sent the older ones as reinforcements for the front. Through the year, Mo would lead many charges into monster camps and villages east of Thamor, using her magic to drive them out. By a year's end, they made a third fort, Fort Deviant, located in a small stretch of land between the southernmost part of the Settlers River and the lake which led into the moat around the ruined monster castle. With large areas of control, Mo moved the front away from Fort Chris and made a new front from Fort Solaria to Fort Deviant, and the river that bordered the forest Colonia was set in. In the late winter of 1031 BS, with more trained soldiers and a smaller front, Mo would lead the armies with her friends to raid the valleys south of the river and lake, drastically cutting supplies to Seth's army. And she was able to perfect her enhancement spell to make her soldiers physically stronger, faster, more endurant, and even taller. This boost really helped her soldiers. Hardly any lives were lost by the end of the raids, despite the many battles fought. Note: Mo's enhancement spell wasn't anything like the Solarian metamorphosis. Her effects weren't nearly as extreme, and those affected didn't share the same fate as the Solarian warriors. At the end of 1031 BS, Mo offered Seth a chance to surrender after he lost his many supplies, but he wouldn't back down. While Mo became confident they could win, especially after she and her friends took out a Hydra and used his teeth in a necklace they all wore, Seth's new forces might pose a problem. While the Mewmins have dealt with the same species for many years and learned how to best defeat them, new species from the unknown lands north of the old monster castle with strange new abilities. One that would pose a problem even for Mo's enhanced soldiers. The start of 1030 BS was rough, as during the Stump Day celebrations, for one of the camps she was in at the time was ambushed, as was the front. While it was the largest amount of lives lost in a while, but Seth's armies also took a massive blow too, thanks to Mo's enhancement of the soldiers, which they were all thankful for. Many Mewmins who weren't the warrior type before joined the army to help the number. As with Mo's magic, they felt more confident in themselves and could contribute to fighting for their species. In Thamor, Mo would look down from her new stone tower and would smile at her happy soldiers. She remembered looking down from that wooden tower years and years ago and seeing the simple life they led. And for a while she wouldn't smile, saddened by those who fell fighting. But now she was smiling again. Even though she still wept for every life lost, she enjoyed seeing so many Mewmins fighting for all of them. While her magic allowed them to fight better, the courage to fight didn't come from her magic. Though it did help ignite it, it was still their choice to put their lives on the line. Mo using her enhancement spell. Little is known about Mo's first wand. Its charger was a deeper ruby, found only along the shore where Mo and the other first settlers washed upon. The mill horse was Cadence. Mo would frequently take her out and play with her. Her second wand was more documented. Her heart was blood of amber. The gem on top was the shape. The wings were said to be the same material as her prior wand, thin silver. The ribbon was just that, a plain ribbon, but the handle and wedge held the gem was copper oak, a wood that wasn't found naturally for many decades. This wand ran on raspberry quartz. Nature deposits were found in the mountains that bordered the forest surrounding Colonia. Her crown was simple, mostly gold. The gem was a red diamond. And that was part 1, To Mow Butterfly, the original Monarch. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Please go check out Mewni Historian to see the rest of their art and story. And a big thanks to them for allowing us to feature their biographies on the channel. Hope you all enjoyed again. Have a great rest of your day and see you next time. Goodbye.